Good morning, everybody. How are y'all doing? Good, good. Thank you so much for your patience. I'm very bad with time because I thought 11, not 10. So I'm here. It is now 11 o'clock. So I hope you guys have been having fun. But yes, I am the West Mesa Justice of the Peace. So my court is about 2 miles from here on University in Dobson. I've been there for about 4 years now. I just got reelected to my second term. I ran unopposed. So it's smooth sailing for the next 4 years until we figure out what's happening next. But I'm here in my mother's stead today. If you don't already know, my mother is Kiana Maria Sears. She is the president of the East Valley NAACP. So pretty cool person. And she's like, my presentation, I want to talk about, living legendary. I'm like, okay, so what do you mean by that? You mean living legendarily? What's your vibe? And one of the things she shared with me is that I wasn't born in Arizona, so I can't say born and raised, but my mother had me, and then we moved here. But my family moved to Arizona for opportunity. My parents were from New Orleans. Everything you've seen about, Hurricane King Katrina and everything, like my entire family went through that. So, if we had been raised there, my sibling and I, things would have been a lot different. My mom, she was raised by a Vietnam vet, and also my grandmother, she worked for the city of New Orleans pretty much her whole life in utilities, wastewater, things of that nature, which is funny because as I grew up, I watched my mom do the same job for the state of Arizona with the Arizona Corporation Commission. So I spent my entire childhood watching my mom help people get involved in the community. Growing up, I was like the only, if my sibling wasn't there, I was the only black person in the room, the only black child rather. And so I always did very well in school. My parents were very involved in my education and all of that, but she had to do a lot of advocacy because there are not always people who wanted like the best for me, right? So she would have to come to school a lot and ask a lot of questions and say, okay, well, why is my daughter not sitting in the front of the classroom? And there was always something, but she did it in a way where I didn't feel like, obviously I stood out, but I never felt bad about it because I just knew, she just wanted things to go well for me. So she did a lot of things like that. I mean, we were in Girl Scouts, we did everything. We hosted exchange students from over 10 different countries when I was growing up, so we were able to get exposed to other cultures and not just kind of be in our own little bubble. Of course, as we know, Mesa has changed a lot. So now, as where we are right now in West Mesa, I live down the street in my district, and this area is mostly people of color who are lower class. So it's really different from when I grew up. I mean, I grew up in East Mesa. I went to Red Mountain High, but I spent a lot of time over here because this is where all the fun was. YMCA, anything going on at the MAC before we had this beautiful, multi-million-dollar building. Everything was, very common, but super fun. So, yeah, we went through a lot, and as I got older, I kept seeing my mom continue to be involved, join other organizations, because as I got older, you're not dealing with a kid anymore. You don't have to really be a part of the PTA. So then,
I'd love to get you on camera.
oh, where?
Walk towards the center of the
I'm just like, where am I? Oh, okay. Should I stand right here? Okay. Sorry, didn't know. Yeah, no problem. Where was I? But yeah, so as I got older, I wondered, I'm like, what is my mom gonna do next? And I went off to college, and I myself, I never really wanted to be involved in politics. I knew I always wanted to help people, whether that is through healthcare. I wanted to be a dentist. I wanted to be a psychologist. I wanted to be a gynecologist. I was looking for all these different ways that I could especially help women in healthcare and education, which is something my mother's also very passionate about. But it kept coming back to international relations. So that's the path that I went on that was kind of put on me by my mom always having exchange students in our home. But as time went on, she told me, hey, you know, I'm gonna run for school board. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. That definitely sounds like something that my mom would do because she knows everyone. You walk around town, they're like, oh yeah, well, you know, Kiana, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, that's my mom. They're like, oh, okay, we all love her. Like anytime you meet my mom, people say, oh, we just love her so much because she's just a really cool, giving person. And so, yeah, she ran for office, and it was the craziest thing because I didn't live at home. I wasn't there, so a lot of people ask me, "Oh, you ran for office because of your mom?" I'm like, actually, not necessarily. It didn't happen the way that you think it happened. I was kind of on the outskirts, you know, trying to get my degree and seeing her from time to time when she was doing her run, and in the end, it was a funny thing because it was 2016, so we had a really bad person get elected, but at the same time, my mom got elected to the school board, and she became the first person of color ever elected to the Mesa Public School Governing Board. It's a pretty big deal because the Mesa School District and that whole thing, that is the biggest school district in the state. They manage a budget of about $531 million. So now, like I think, like, you know, those kids, they have somebody who is advocating for them. This district is mostly children of color, and they've never had that kind of representation before. So it's really cool to think about. But it's all good. But yeah, it's fun because Arizona is such a young state. So back to what she was talking about living legendaries, all these people that I talk to, like, it's weird because I'm part of it. Like, you know, I'm 28. I was elected when I was 24 years old. Yeah, so that's a whole nother bit. But knowing that, you know, I am the youngest judge in the state of Arizona. When I ran that year, I was the youngest person on the ballot in the entire state. To this day, the second youngest is actually a very good friend of mine who is the Globe Justice of the Peace. So he's out of county, but he's also black. So that's kind of funny. But all these people I meet, like Burdetta Hodge, she's on the Tempe City Council. She's the first black woman ever elected to Tempe City Council. She's also the first black woman on the Tempe High School Governing Board. And I just walk around and I talk to these people. Her son, Jevin Hodge, just ran for Congress. He's gonna keep coming. Hopefully he gets it this time. But if he wins, he'll be Arizona's first black congressman. Like, all these things are happening right now, which is fascinating. And people always tell me, they're like, don't forget, you gotta keep that newspaper clipping. You know, like 10 years from now, people are gonna ask you for that. Like, people are gonna want to remember all of these things. So I'm really excited that I can be a part of history. I will briefly, because I know we don't have a ton of time, briefly tell you about my journey as to how I got to where I am today. So I talked about it a little bit. I was in college. I was trying to figure out, you know, what do I want to do? I knew that I wanted to work for the State Department. My end goal still is to eventually be an ambassador to another country. I really believe in diplomacy. I believe that if we can get people in the same room and talk and, you know, get on the same page, find our similarities, because we have more similarities than differences. We all want, you know, food, shelter. We want our kids to be able to grow up and have a good education, like just the basic human needs, you know, aside from, you know, politics, religion, and all of that other stuff. So I was exploring that, and then I kept having someone reach out to me saying, hey, do you want to work at the Arizona House of Representatives? They need an assistant. And I'm like, no, I really don't want to do that. I had never been interested in local politics. I just felt like, there's more to do, there's more to see, because I'd spent so much time outside of the US as a young person. And I kept being asked, I kept denying it, and then Representative Reginald Boulding, who ended up running for Secretary of State and everything, he called me personally and said, hey, I really need an assistant. We're starting session next week. Can you please be my assistant? And I just felt like, well, he asked me personally, so I guess I have to go. So I took the job, and I'm very transparent, I'm very frank. I tell everybody this. I hated it. I hated it so much. And every day, I would cry at my desk because it was very difficult seeing people who had spent a lot of time, like the pages, everybody who does the research, putting effort into writing these bills just to have, overhear the conversation. Hey, this bill is about affordable health care. It's written by Representative so-and-so. Can you look at this? The representative said, oh, Representative so-and-so? No, I'm good. It doesn't matter what the contents of the bill was. It didn't matter if it would help their constituents. It was all just about power games and, high school type of bickering, and it was just, yes, it was very frustrating because I knew, but when you're in it and you have to be in it every day, it just became very taxing. So I just kind of treated it as an internship. I would go down to the lawn. Whenever lobbyists would come, I would talk to people, see, what kind of causes were there. There'd be things for, the environment, healthcare, all different types of things that they're lobbying the legislators for. So I'm trying to talk to different people to see how can I make an impact, because I know I don't want to stay here. If it's something international, cool. If not, if I can find something on the local level, we'll deal with that. So I started saying, informational interviews, like what can we do? And people just started saying, just run for office. Just run for office. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that at all. They're like, come on, like it would be a good idea. I'm like, I don't want to just run to run, because a lot of people just run to run. And no, I'm not gonna judge them or anything like that, but some people, they just run because they have an end goal of what they want to do, or a certain position. But for me, I just wanted to make that impact because I saw all those years of my mom putting in the work, and I always wanted to do something similar, even if it didn't look the same. So one day on the lawn, I saw a bunch of kids setting up chairs. They're all dressed the same in like these kind of like khaki outfits. And we had a legislative day where kids would come. They'd hear people talk about, how bills are made. There's some entertainment, things of that nature. It was the strangest thing because I'm like, they're middle school kids. They don't seem like they're part of the event, but they're setting up chairs. And so I talked to another representative and said, hey, what's going on with these kids? And I noticed one had an eyebrow tattoo. I was like, he's probably 14. That's a little bit weird. And she said, oh, they're from the kid prison. And I said, what? What are you talking about? She's like, yeah, they're here to set up the chairs for the event. And I was just horrified. I was like, are you serious? Like, you think this is normal and okay? And it just so happened, who was at the Capitol that day? Kiana Maria Sears walking around trying to save the world. So I see my mom, and I'm like, hey, what are you doing at my job? And so then she comes over. She's all happy. She's been talking to people all day trying to, make things happen. And I told her, and I was just like, this is crazy, and I'm really upset, and I was crying. I was crying because I was so angry. And these are like kind of like the things that push me. I was already looking at applying for law school because we've always been very like social justice oriented. I mean, obviously, just being who we are in Arizona, in Mesa, you always kind of have to like be on top of whatever is going on. Because you're going to be a target. But Mesa passed a private prison ordinance that same year. So for anyone who doesn't know, yeah, that happened. So if the if the prison is 90% full, me, anyone who lives in Mesa, we're subsidizing that other 10%, because those beds aren't full, and that's a contract that we've made as Mesa. So that really made me mad, and I was going to the council meetings about that. This whole situation at the Capitol really upset me, and is what finally made me be like, okay. And she's like, you need to run for office. You should run for justice of the peace. And I was like, what are you talking about? You're crazy. Like, you know, like you look at the wall, you see all these people, they're all like older, you know, white men. Like, I don't fit in there. And she's like, well, yeah, that's the whole point, right? Like, because that's why representation, if you don't see someone in that position, you can never see yourself there. So I was like, okay, I will humor her. I'm gonna go to the courts, I'm gonna start observing, see what they do. Because it's a community court. What I do is class 1 and class 3 misdemeanors. The most serious thing I see, and most of what I see actually, is DUIs. I have Casino, Arizona, and Talking Stick in my jurisdiction. I am working in one of the busiest courts in the county of Maricopa. So it's a lot. But I started going around talking to judges, and they're like, oh yeah, you're smart, you're motivated, you can do this. The more people I talk to, they're like, oh yeah, no problem, you got this. And I was like, this is crazy, these people are actually encouraging me. Like, but I knew, as the momentum was building, I was like, this is like a real thing that's gonna happen. And so shortly after my 23rd birthday, I filed my papers and I started running. I was working as a part-time assistant teacher with 3rd and 4th graders. So I'd be with them all day. Around 2:30, I would get off, go home, change into my sneakers, and start knocking doors and collecting signatures. I did this for 18 months straight because this was the midterm after the other president got elected. So people were going nuts. They're like, how do we do? How can we fix this? People made the joke. Everybody and their mother was running for office. Me and my mother literally were running for office at the same time. She was running for the Corporation Commission at that time. And I always have to put this. She was the only one who actually worked at the Arizona Corporation Commission who was running and had the experience to get the job. But, there are other wonderful plans for her. So, I just worked really hard. I didn't have a campaign manager. I didn't have, any type of dark money or anything, like trying to, get me into this seat to do whatever nefarious deeds people do. I really just wanted to get in there and help people. So I ended up winning by 57%. So landslide victory. And the guy that was there before, it's kind of funny. We're actually friendly now. We're actually allies. Because he ended up, he lost the election and everything, but then he ended up being appointed to be the East Mesa Justice of the Peace, and then he won his election. So I'm West and he's East, and we're moving into the new building, and we are thick as thieves because we both really, really care about the community. He went to Westwood, right there, his family has grown up in this area for a long time. So it's funny when you can think that somebody is your enemy or may not agree with all the things that you're doing, but then you actually come to know the person, you're like, oh, again, it goes back to diplomacy. We care about the same things. He has 9 kids. He wants the same things for his girls, that I want, for my future children, or even I consider any kid that I interact with, they're my kid, they're part of our community, they're our kids. So won the election and I hit the ground running, and I feel like I've been able to make a huge difference. I still bring in that global aspect to the courts. We actually had people from the Parliament of Hungary in my court on Valentine's Day. So I hosted them and talked to them about what I do, and they were from the minority party, so they represent the same type of community I represent, and talk about how challenging it is, because they're not as young as me, but they're still younger men, and they talked about how difficult it is to be in the parliament where they're not in a dictatorship, but it's pretty, and so there were times where their family said, I don't know if we should tell people you're in the parliament, what are we what do we do about that? So a lot of interesting conversations, and they were very encouraging, and I was very inspired by them. And so I'm going to keep going. My favorite thing is to waive people's fines when they get out of prison, so they can get their license. And yeah, it's the best thing ever. Get their license back, get back on track, and go get jobs. And just give people a break, because we're not doing felony here. It's a community court, and anyone is welcome to visit anytime. It's a public court. So that's all I got to say.
All right, man, that was pretty darn cool. Thank you so much for coming by to spend some of your time with us today. And for those of you who are joining us online on YouTube, watching this later, make sure that you smash that like button, as the kids say. Hit the, I don't know, do the kids still say that? Okay, all right. I don't know. Haven't been one in a while. We didn't have a like button when I was. Make sure you subscribe to HSGP. You can check us out at hsgp.org. You can also check us out on Meetup, where you can see all the cool events, all the different opportunities to give back and just be part of a community that's doing really cool things for the Phoenix area. So yeah, and even pop into hsgp.org and consider becoming a member of the Humanist Society of Greater Phoenix. We are always looking to bring in people who are dedicated to our commitments and making the world a better place. And also look for ways to make the world a little bit better of a place. Just little things you can do here and there. Hold the door for somebody, right? Let somebody in front of you in traffic, you know what I mean? Just little things like that you can do makes the things a little bit better for everyone. So at this time, let's open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions for our guests. All right, we got one right over here, so.
Hi, Judge Sears. Thank you for coming. I was one of the ones who was here when you were speaking. We had our safely distanced Black Lives Matter rally in our parking lot in 2020, I guess it was, right in the middle of the pandemic. So, and that was wonderful. And I want to I don't know if everybody knows that Kiana, her mom, is the president of, somebody mentioned the East Valley NAACP, and they have their monthly meetings here in this building. And so we're very, very proud of that, and want to make sure that everybody, we don't put them on Meetup or anything. They're their own monthly meetings. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that that's happening, and we're very happy that they are doing that. Thank you for coming today.
All right. You respond to that, or you just gonna appreciate it? Or?
I will hand the mic off to you. I just wanted to mention the NAACP is the oldest social justice organization in the United States, and anyone is welcome to join any type of chapter, so feel free. Yeah, feel free to reach out to them, because they always love new members.
All right, any more questions or comments for the speaker? Nope, you don't have to stand if you don't like to.
Hi. I came here today because of I wanted to see you speak about making a difference of being legendary. I thought, because I've been trying, but I don't have the access level that you do. So whenever I am doing those extra things, like standing up for something that I see that's not going right, like the children's prison, I've always been an advocate, but always falls on deaf ears because it's entry level of employers, coworkers, or just a mom at the PTA meeting. My opinions my efforts aren't really, they don't get utilized. So what do you recommend? For example, I've been in the medical field for 20 years. I've recently quit because there's no more compassion. I was instructed not to look the patient in the eye because that would engage in conversation. It is all about the turnover. And so I kept getting in trouble for spending too much time with the patient. I needed to get out of there. But I could not be in the company of another person and not say hello, or not say, how was your day? Not treat them like a human. They're here for a reason. We need to do the common courtesies. So I quit a whole career for that reason. But that's not doing anything legendary. That's just, my own belief. So how does one in that's not a political powerhouse or influencer, an influencer to other people, just a common man, how do we become legendary?
Well, you're certainly an influencer to me now, so going forward, you have that. But
First of all, I just want to say that you're not just somebody on the PTA or just somebody who now used to be in healthcare. Like, all those things are extremely important. I don't think we all realize the small impacts that we can have every day, because that's how it started with me, and I continue to do those things. Like, I literally run into people from high school, from college, who are like, hey, like, I remember back when we had that conversation about Black Lives Matter. I remember when we had that conversation about, the school to prison pipeline. And like, they tell me, like, I went home and I talked to my parents, and that opened up a dialogue, and they have a different perspective on those things now. So never feel like just because you're not like elected or anything like that you're not making a difference. Those conversations matter. And what you were talking about, how you're like, how can I just see someone and not look into their eyes and have a conversations is how everything happens. That's how we're able to do all these international trade deals, stop missiles from going off. It's the power of the word. The power of the word is so strong. It has the power to Absolutely, but you don't have to change. You can still do what you're doing. So I mean, like, you go to events like this, you meet like-minded people, and find like whatever your niche is. Like, not everybody has to be a politician. I mean, like, I am in this position because I really care about the community, and I'm like, okay, like, they always say the people that don't want to do things, they're like, should be in that position, because they're not doing it for any other reason, But you are fabulous just the way you are. So never feel like you're not doing enough. Just keep doing things like this and meeting people and growing your network. It's all about just spreading the word. That's one of the reasons why I like the Humanist Society.
That's why we like you. All right, do we have any other questions or comments for our speaker? Yes, we do. Let me come over this way. All right.
I'm curious what your point of view as a jurist. There are many people who get arrested and get ingested into the legal system for doing things, not doing anything harmful, not harming anybody. There's no victim, there's no property damage, but because they disobeyed a bureaucrat, they are now, lost their freedom, and they're facing, jail, prison time, and/or lots of fines. What's your perspective on a society that, what do you feel about how we should handle that sort of thing?
Not to mention the difficulty of getting out of the system once you wind up in it. It's a whole different level of challenge. So.
Exactly. So that's actually a lot of what my focus is. So our society is really focused on like punishment. As an organization, as the justice courts, especially colleagues who are like-minded, we really push toward, reducing recidivism, more like reconciliation, rehabilitation, the whole making the victim whole, restorative justice. So, and like you said, sometimes there is no victim, right? But for example, and again, anything that I say here today, I'll stand by. I know I'm being recorded. That doesn't bother me. I'm not going to show up differently in any type of room. Trespassing. We have, everybody knows, a very bad homeless problem, which is really the failure of the government to do the right thing. So I have those citations come into my court all the time because they're like, well, I didn't have anywhere to go. I was, standing under the bridge or whatever. Before I was like, okay, well, go talk to the prosecutor, because I'm like, they'll work it out, give them community service, whatever. But over time, I was like, why are we doing this? like, this is not in the best interest of judicial economy or their life. Like, they could be doing other things right now. So when I have people come in for trespassing, I just dismiss the ticket. And I say, have a good day. Sure.
So what would you say to somebody who maybe doesn't see things the way that you do, who might say that you're what do they say, legislating from the bench, that it's not the judge's responsibility to decide whether or not trespassing should be a crime. The legislature decided that it is a crime, or the city council or whatever entity, and it's up to you to apply the laws that they passed. What would you say to somebody? I'm not saying that because I totally support what you're doing, but if somebody were to say that, what might your response be?
My response would be, I never am saying like, oh, it's not a crime. I still understand that it's a crime and it's on the books and everything like that. But I don't think it really makes sense to fine somebody for standing somewhere they weren't supposed to be standing, where they wouldn't be if they had housing, because they don't have money for the fine. So then we're going to issue a warrant for their arrest for not paying the fine, so that they can go to jail and then, be stuck in there for however long if they're not released on, no bail or their own recognizance. So I just kind of try to talk to people the same way, you have to find a way to talk to people, like when it comes to immigration. I'm like, hey, like, do you want those people to like contribute to our society and like have healthy children, have a good life, or do you want them to be a burden on you as a taxpayer and have to, deal with all that? And when you just kind of shift things to their perspective and see what are they interested in, what is important to them, then you can find common ground every single time. Republicans love me a lot. Because we can always find something in common. It doesn't matter, what the background is. But like you're saying, it's difficult. But I waive a lot of fines, and what I have is judicial discretion. So I'm not doing anything illegal. It's like, but I, as a judge, have the discretion to decide what makes the most sense. My name's on the building. I'll stand by anything that I do. So my hope, and it is happening, that more judges are moving in that direction towards restorative justice and making sure we have something that works all together. And I do juveniles. I give them all diversion. I make them write essays. I have them do community service. I have them do things that are actually going to help them and the community. That is what I think justice actually is.
I would agree with that. All right, and the last question that we have for you before we wrap up is if somebody is watching this or they're here today and they want to kind of stay informed, stay up to date, stay involved in their local judicial process, what would you recommend that a person should do, just as an average citizen, where they can be part of that positive change that we've been talking about today?
Report to jury duty, please. We can't do the trials without you. People think it's like not a big deal. Oh, I just won't go. But when we have someone who's been trying to go to trial on their DUI for 6 months and people aren't showing up to be on the jury, it can be kind of rough. So show up to juries. I find it interesting, even though I pretty much know, what the evidence is going to be, especially in a DUI case. But show up to that. If you aren't called to a jury, you can come sit in the courts. Like I tell people all the time, come down and watch me talk to people, do trial, take pleas, basically have counseling sessions with family, because that's kind of what being a judge entails at times. If you want to be involved in the legislative process, because we are separate, judicial and legislative, but you can request to speak at the Capitol, and you can watch the meetings for the Judiciary Committee, because they're always making changes. But I would say justice courts we see 90% of the court cases in Maricopa County. We are your judicial system. We have Superior Court, we have Municipal Court, we have Superior Court, and Supreme, but we do most of it. So just stop on by. We're all very accessible. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. My number is out there. So we're happy. If you ask pretty much any of my colleagues, we're always happy to host and talk to you.
All right. We have Oh, we got one more question, and then we're gonna close out and move on to our closing comments here. But first, let's come on over and hear from Athena.
You mentioned jury duty, and I realized I haven't been called for service in like over 10 years. And it used to happen all the time. I mean, every couple years or something like that. I don't know. I haven't really been able to find out if I'm even still in the pool. I don't know if it has anything to do with what was happening in my life back then, which shouldn't be a problem, but for some people it is. And, but I'm just curious if you knew there was a way to find out if you're still in the pool.
That's a great question. What should a citizen do if they're not getting called for jury duty and they want to be part of the civic process?
I mean, I would just double check with the jury summonser. Like, there's literally someone who has that job description. It's her job to pull all the pools every month. So I can actually get that information to you, so you can make sure you're still on the rolls.
All righty. All right, you guys give it up one more time for our guest, the Honorable Judge Sears. And for those of you watching online, make sure that you smash that like button. Feel free to leave a productive and kind response or comment in the comment section below. We love that kind of productive engagement. Subscribe to HSGP on YouTube. Come check us out at hsgp.org and consider becoming a member. You can also find us on Meetup, like we said before, where you can get to cool events like this one and all kinds of other great stuff we're doing in the community. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day, and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you. Thank you, Kat. Okay. Kat.